Hello, fellow Shakespeareans. Is it time for another episode of SONGspeare 2020? This time on Hamlet. Or as I sometimes like to call it, Ham-melt. That's right, we have finally come to everybody's favorite brooding prince of Denmark. Now, if his brooding is a little bit much for you, have no fear because we're not actually going to hear anything from Hamlet in the music for this episode. What we will hear a lot of is music from Ophelia. That is, by and large, the most popular music from Hamlet, or the most popular text that has been set to music. It's also music in the show. Have been Ophelia's songs. So the songs that Ophelia sings in her mad scene when she's losing it, and she sings all these different songs. Now, there are some historical guesses at what those songs are. They're all folk songs. They were all well-known songs. They're not song texts that Shakespeare wrote originally. I'm not sure that any of them have been nailed down as officially the melody that the song was sung to, but Ross Deffin has found possibilities for those, so I will put those in the links below the video. There are also historical possibilities for the other song in the play. These are the only songs that Ophelia songs, and then the Gravedigger song, In Youth When I Did Love. So there are Ross Deffin's guesses at what those songs might have sounded like in Shakespeare's day, so links down below. In terms of better-known musical settings of these songs, Brahms and Strauss both wrote settings of Ophelia Lieder, so songs drawn from that scene of Ophelia. Brahms, I believe, wrote 5, so all 5 times that she sings. They may not actually be 5 separate songs, but each utterance gets its own song, and I believe Strauss wrote 3. So if you're curious about 2 very heavy-hitting German composers and their versions of it, they're in German, go look those up. Ophelia Lieder by Brahms and by Strauss. I didn't choose to sing any of them for this one because they're really, really hard to play. They're better known. They're in German. Various reasons. Another really well-known setting is by Roger Quilter, whose Shakespeare songs I have heard or talked a lot about, but will not sing very many of because they're pretty popular. His version of How Should I Your True Love Know is also very popular, maybe one of his more popular ones. It's also gorgeous, so I encourage you to go look it up because I'm not going to sing it right here. Speaking of Brahms and Strauss, the Germans are not the only ones who were inspired by Ophelia's mad scene. I found several settings by French composers of the songs that are in that scene. The ones I found are by Camille Saint-Saëns, Hector Berlioz, and the one we're actually going to hear, which is by Ernest Chausson. So all of them are in French, they're all translations. Actually, 2 of them are Ophelia. One is actually a translation of the scene where Gertrude recounts the death of Ophelia. So it's still about Ophelia, and it's called La Mort d'Ophélie. So it's not from that scene, it's just a recounting of the way that Ophelia died as Gertrude says it to Hamlet. I'm very happy to say that this is another highly collaborative episode, so without any further ado, let's get on to the music. Starting off the episode in familiar territory, it is a setting of In Youth When I Did Love by Mario Castelnuovo-Tedesco. We've heard a lot from him before. He's an Italian composer. He lived from 1895 to 1968, and his music, I think last episode I actually mentioned that his music tends to be very ironic, and I was talking there about how it was actually sort of sentimental. This really highlights that irony. It's sort of a biting, sarcastic, bitter view of In Youth When I Did Love, of how foolish that was and how stupid it was and what a waste of time. For this piece, and especially for this piano accompaniment, I am joined by Cindy Lindeen-Martin on the piano again, who has been very generous with her time for these episodes. I'm happy to sing with her any chance I get. This is the only setting that I chose to sing, and it's actually one of few settings, surprisingly, that I was even able to find, of the Gravedigger song. So the Gravedigger, when he's digging and Hamlet is overhearing the conversation between these 2 gravediggers, and he sings the song In Youth When I Did Love, apparently that didn't inspire that many musical settings. There are others, but they were kind of older and a little dusty. So here is Mario Castelnuovo-Tedesco's In Youth When I Did Love.
act all the time, for on my behalf, oh, methought there was nothing meet. But age with his stealing steps hath clawed me in his clutch, and hath skipped me into the land, as if I had never been such. A pickaxe and a spade, for and a shrouding sheet. A pit of clay for to be made, for such a guest is meet. A pit of clay for to be made, for such a guest is meet.
With the Gravedigger's grave dug, we now turn to Ophelia for the rest of the episode. The rest of the pieces are all from Ophelia's mad scene in some form or another. The first piece is by Maude Valérie White. She was a British composer who lived from 1855 to 1937, so a pretty long life and a pretty transitional time. The end of the, well, really the middle to the end of the 19th century, well into the 20th century, although she's kind of remembered as a Victorian composer. Her music falls into that style. She was a very prolific composer of song, although she also composed in other media, but especially as an influential song composer and as a woman in the Victorian era. And her style can be seen in the later songs by British composers who came after her. She studied at the Royal Academy of Music, and she lived a pretty full life. She traveled all over the place. She spent a lot of time in Italy. She went to other continents. She wrote 2 memoirs about her life and her travels, so she was an interesting person, and I think that shows in her music. Her music is very passionate. It's very dramatic. It is Victorian, which I'll leave you to kind of suss out what exactly that means. It has a certain feel to it, a drawing room feel maybe. So this is her setting of How Should I Your True Love Know?
How should I your true love know from another one? By his cockle hat and staff, and his sandal shoon. He is dead and gone, lady, he is dead and gone. At his head a grass green turf, at his heels a stone. White his shroud as the mountain snow, loaded with sweet flowers, which bewept to the grave did go, with true love shine. And will he not come again? No, no, he's dead. Go to thy deathbed. He never, never will come again. He never will come again. His beard was as white as snow, all flaxen was his poll. He is gone. He is gone. And we cast away mourn. God have mercy on his soul.
Our third song and our second Ophelia song is by Ernest Chausson. It is his Chanson d'Ophélie. It's a setting of a French translation by Maurice Bouchot, and it begins at "He is dead and gone, lady." So that text in "How Should I Your True Love Know" are following that. Chausson was a French romantic composer, kind of right in the middle of the Romantic era. If you look at his dates, if 1855 to 1899 seems really short, it is pretty short. He died in a bicycle accident at the age of 44. He is one of those composers who, had they lived longer, who knows what their influence would have been, who knows what their output would have been, especially with Chanson, because he was sort of a notoriously careful composer. Composing was a really slow process for him. He tended to agonize over his pieces, and he was actually very wealthy, so there was a bit of a sense that composing was just a hobby for him, and he was just an amateur. That's what some of his detractors thought of him, and that's what some of his insecurities seem to have been. So he spent a lot of time composing, so had he lived to, say, 88 instead of 44, who knows what else he would have churned out. He did have relationships with many of the other French composers and really just artistic personalities, probably because he was rich. He was good friends with Claude Debussy until near the end of his life, when Debussy cheated on his wife and kind of caused a bit of a stir. But Debussy always respected his music. He also hosted salons where he met Fauré, he met Henri Duparc, who was not a super well-known French composer, but a very well-known and sort of loved composer of French vocal music. And his life overlapped with Sanson and other French composers. I'm very excited to introduce two new faces to SONGspeare 2020. They are Emily Murdock, soprano, and Steven Aguilo Arbues, who is a pianist, he is a conductor, he's a voice coach, an opera coach, and an all-around nice guy. So Emily Murdock and Steven Aguilo Arbues, and they are performing without me being involved, so you get a break from me and my face. If you're wondering how and why they're performing in such close quarters, no, they're not just super irresponsible, they are actually also married. So in addition to being incredibly talented musicians in their own right, they're also a power couple. Here is Ernest Chausson's Chanson d'Ophélie.
Il est mort et on bien souffert, madame.
Our final two songs appear as a set because they come from a set. They are from William H. Henderson's 5 songs for soprano and piano. I'm not a soprano, but there will be a piano, so, you know. Information about William H. Henderson has been a little hard to turn up. There's a bit of an asterisk about this whole thing. According to the new anthology of art songs by African American composers, he lives in LA. He studied at Howard University. He did doctoral studies at UCLA and a host of other schools. And he has composed in a variety of different styles. He's performed with orchestras. He has recordings, his 5 songs for soprano and piano. I found a performance on YouTube that was in a recital, but also has been recorded for Orion Records. But other than that, I can't really find much other information about him, so if anybody knows more, point me in that direction. If somebody who's a student of or knows William H. Henderson, since I believe he's still alive, just tell me and I'd be happy to learn more about him. I'm not sure if this is the order that they appear in the actual set of songs, but the first thing you're going to hear is his setting of How Should I Your True Love Know? And then you'll hear his setting of Tomorrow is Valentine's Day, which he calls simply Valentine's Day. The first setting, How Should I Your True Love Know? Really both settings. They're very energetic. They're a little more modern. They're a little more akin to something that you might hear in, I struggle to say this, but musical comedy. They have a bit of a musical comedy feel. They're definitely in the classical area, but they have a sort of lightness to them, or maybe just a rhythmic drive that's a little bit more grounded in American pop music. I struggle to say that. Maybe you can think of better words. So first up, here is William H. Henderson's How Should I Your True Love Know? For tenor and piano.
How should I your true love know from another one? By his cockle hat and staff, and his sandal shoe. He is dead and gone, lady. He is dead and gone. At his head a grass-green turf, at his heels a stone. White his shroud as the mountain snow, loaded with sweet flowers, which bewept to the grave did go with true love showers.
Rounding out the end of the episode is William H. Henderson's Valentine's Day, also from his 5 songs for soprano and piano. This piece is upbeat, it's very exciting. It doesn't really feel a lot like Ophelia is losing her mind and in a dire state. Neither did the previous one, his setting of How Should I Your True Love Know? They're very much character pieces in their own right that are sort of based on the text in the moment, not necessarily the theatrical situation in the play. This text centers on love and lovers at Valentine's Day, or maybe not. Yes, tomorrow is Valentine's Day. And it's pretty, maybe by modern standards, a little inappropriate, but it's Shakespeare, so can it really be? Of course it can. The text is something of a dialogue between two lovers, so you hear a sort of resistant maiden who is nevertheless encouraged to go to bed with her gentleman lover, and the musing at the end of the piece is that maybe she would have married him, but if she had, would he have wanted her? So, for anybody who thinks Shakespeare is dull and dusty, that's, these are questions that we continue to ask ourselves about love and relationships. So here's William H. Henderson's Valentine's Day.
the chamber door. Let in a maid, that out a maid never departed more. By Jeers and by Saint Charity, alack and fie for shame, young men will do it if they come to it. By cock, they are to blame. Quoth she, before you tumbled me, you promised me to wed. So would I had done by yonder sun, and thou hadst not come to my bed.
And that's a wrap for Hamlet. Thank you so much, Cindy and Emily and Steven. I love having collaborators, getting variety and other people in these episodes, and especially people who are so talented. So thank you so much. I have no doubt that people will really appreciate it as well. As usual, like, comment, subscribe, especially if you loved things, especially if you hated things, just let me know. If you want to see more of these people, let them know in the comments, and then we might, if you're reading along with the Shakespeare 2020 reading group, you will note that Hamlet happened a while ago, and I am just sort of now catching up. I didn't decide to start doing this project until we were about halfway through the year, so as we go along, when I find breaks, or I just find that I have time and the motivation, I'll be going back and getting the things that I missed in the first place, but still have juicy musical selections. Happy Shakespeare, everybody! See you next time. And flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.